Hello out there in podcast land. This is your voice of Friendship Village coming at you once again. And we think, well, we know indeed we have a most interesting guest that will be sharing with you in just a few moments. But before we get too far into this project, we want to mention to you, our faithful listeners, what our who is our sponsor for this podcast. And it turns out our sponsor for this podcast is the waiters from our local cafe. Dining room. Let's make that dining room. Yes. And we just enjoy them so much, and they're so gracious and helpful, and always with a smile and a thank you, and just makes our dining experience much more pleasant. And so we want you next time you're in the dining hall having a meal, be sure and give a nod to our wait staff. Okay. Well, now I just want to throw in a quick joke, okay? And it goes like this. You've probably heard it before. It's been around a while. Why did the scarecrow earn the reward? Why did he earn the reward? Because he was outstanding in his field. There you go. Hey, how about that? All right. Now we're ready for the guest.
Hey, glad to be with you again. We're going to introduce our guest here in just a minute. And he is a gentleman that does not live here at Friendship Village, but he's very well acquainted with people at Friendship Village. And he is the Executive Director of the Cedar Falls Community Theater and Oster Region. So I'd like to welcome Greg Holt to our campus.
Thanks for coming,
Yes.
getting to chat with me. That's great.
Right. And to get to know our guests, we always like to get a little background info on them. So we'll let Greg take a hold of it and tell us where he was born, raised, educated, and all that good stuff.
Sure. I was born in Oklahoma. We didn't stay there very long. My family moved kind of quickly. We went to Sierra Leone, Africa for 2 years. We were in Massachusetts, and that's where I did my very first play when I was 6 or 7 years old. My mom had put me in an acting class, and there was a kind of famous theater in town where the Yale Rep Company does their summer stock theater, and all these people would come from Broadway and do shows there, and so they needed somebody to be in one of their productions, and asked the acting teacher. She recommended somebody, and she goes, well, there's this one guy who's a handful. So I ended up being in a show at age 7 or whatever, so I've always thought of myself as an actor since then.
Yes.
And it was probably the most famous people I acted with. What's kind of interesting is at the time there was Olympia Dukakis was in it, and Matthew Perry's dad was in it. Matthew Perry actually was born that same summer that I was in the show. His dad was expecting, his wife was expecting at that point. So anyway, that's my little, one of those close brushes with fame. And then off I went to, we went to Malaysia in Southeast Asia for a couple of years, came back, and after that was raised in Washington, D.C. And then went to college in North Carolina and Washington University in St. Louis, and got my graduate degree at the University of Denver in Colorado, and then did a lot of acting here and there for a while. Got back in directing. By the time I was in Chicago, I got back into doing more directing. Came out here to run the Black Hawk Children's Theater many years ago. Went off back to Chicago and back to Little Rock, and then came back here. Worked at First Congregational Church for a while, and then ran the Waterloo Community Playhouse as the artistic director, and now I'm the executive director of the Cedar Falls Community Theater in Cedar Falls, Iowa. And here we are. And now I'm at Friendship Village.
Right.
Yes.
To back up just one thing, what did your parents do that you moved around to all these countries?
They were in the Peace Corps and Foreign Service.
Okay.
My dad taught biochemistry, and so both of these countries had agricultural colleges, and they needed somebody to come help them at the university level at these agricultural colleges.
Good.
So it was fun to
The
kind of
Foreign Service, is that the same as being an ambassador?
It's more like you're a representative of the U.S. government going over to help out, and
Okay.
it's exchange kind of things they'd set up. Then he went and worked for the National Science Foundation and the National Institute of Health, and he was in charge of setting up reciprocal information exchanges between us and Southeast Asia.
So you got a
countries.
lot of education in many different countries.
Yes. And when I was in Malaysia, I had to have half of my classes were actually in Malay, and that was quite a challenge. And I had to take a big standardized test, because in 5th grade, everybody takes this standardized test, and it determines where you're going to go the rest of your life. I felt kind of bad for folks who don't score well on that, because it means you will not get to go to college prep classes. You will be taken into like farming trade classes right off the bat.
Wow.
You're sort of limited on your scope, and they decide all that in 5th grade.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of it is based on, at that point, if you have a family that's fairly well-to-do and you can spend time studying, you're going to do better on your grades than those who have many kids all running around and nobody can pay attention to them.
Right.
Was
And
the
did you
test in English?
The test was partly in English. There's one, it's in 5 sections. One of it was Malay, and that, of course, is not in English. There was an English section. There was what I recall is a science section, and that I think was also in English. But then there was math and geography, and the geography section was in Malay.
Wow.
So yeah, they were in the process of changing over to all Malay. At the time I was there, my brother was a little younger, and his classes were all in Malay, because when the English had ruled the peninsula, they had changed over to English, and they were on their way going back to Malay.
Wow.
But it's an interesting country because it's made up predominantly of Chinese, Indians, and Malaysians. And the Chinese, for the most part at that time, were the business owners. The Indians were the professional folks, the ones who were the doctors and lawyers, and the Malaysians were the farmers and laborers and such.
Mm-hmm.
But it was 3 pretty equal populations of folks.
Wow. I did not know that.
It's
You
interesting
learned a lot.
country. And there's some very cool theater over there. There's the shadow puppet stuff where they have those very intricately paper cutouts they put against a backdrop that's lit from the back, and you see the shadow puppets. And then they also have the Wayang-golok, which are the more carved puppets. You kind of see them with the hair flipped around like the Thai style puppets. They did a lot of kind of puppet style theater. And then they had the monkey mask. There was a lot of shows which had the monkey masks on, and the monkey would be a major part of the theatrical experience.
So they're very theatrical minded.
Yeah, but that also had a lot of dance and music to it, and so I think I got a lot of ideas from seeing that style of drama, and can apply it now to things here.
Right. You stored it away for future.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's always
I can see
good.
that.
Theater basically is just a collaboration of taking things that work and readapting them to fit your current production. And it's a very temporary art form. It's like if you're going to paint a painting, it may not last forever, but it'll at least sit in somebody's home for a long time. But theater, you're putting your heart and soul and trying to make it look as good as you possibly can. The actors are learning their lines, their songs, their dances, all that work and effort is put into it. And you've built this beautiful set on stage, and then 2 weeks you run the show, and then it's taken right back down to the bare bones. Kind of like the mandala. You blow away the sand mandala. So, yeah. But it's temporary art, and we don't worry about posterity too much, I guess.
No.
Just hope that you helped out somebody along the way that takes your ideas and is using them other places.
You're doing it for the enjoyment of people also.
Yeah, you're definitely, it's a
It's a world of
collaboration.
entertainment, and that's what we need.
And I've always said I appreciate doing a show where there's a really good ensemble. If people see themselves as more important than other people on stage, it can be a difficult environment to work in. But if we all realize we're in it together, and the person that's helping you out with props or running your lights is just as important as the lead singer, that the show really has that nice ensemble feel.
Everybody has a part, and then
Right,
if they do
and
their part, they all work together.
Right. You have to appreciate the person that's illuminating you on stage if you're down there.
And now you
singing.
can tell us about the future of things coming too.
Yes, we have. We just announced our season for Cedar Falls Community Theater coming up, our summer musical. Well, we have the Rat Pack musical first. That's the end of our last season, and that's going to be in March, middle of March. And then we have Rent, which is kind of a classic now. That will be our summer production. We're doing Jane Austen's Emma, but it's Emma the pop musical, which takes place in a high school. That'll be in August. And we're doing The Hound of the Baskervilles, starring Jenny Watson and Shirley Holmes or something like that. It's the nieces of, it's a thriller slash comedy with the nieces of Holmes and Watson. Mm-hmm. And then we're doing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which is a new musical that was on Broadway not long ago. We're doing Lost in Yonkers, which is a classic Neil Simon play about this time next year. Very funny, about these two little boys who go to live with their grandma in Yonkers, and their uncle, who's being chased by the mob, shows up and causes a lot of zaniness. And then we'll be wrapping the season up with Grey Gardens, which is a documentary about Jackie Kennedy Onassis and her friends, and how fast you can lose wealth when you've gained it. And they were kind of stuck in their little home where power was cut off and water was cut off. And anyway, it was made into a movie and then a musical. So that's a musical that will be next spring.
Wow.
Like to keep things busy
Yeah.
along the way. We'll have a movie festival in August, Iowa Movie Festival. And we just finished our cabaret series in January, where we each Thursday night we had a different open mic event. Spoken word poetry was really popular, very, very crowded. And then we did kind of, you were at the mercy of the weather a little bit in January, February. You know, if it's nice weather, you get a better turnout than others. But we did an open mic for stand-up comedians and people that wanted to come play music.
Were you involved with Cedar Falls during COVID, or were you still in Waterloo?
No, I was still at Waterloo, and we both ran things a little differently. In Waterloo, I remember on March 23rd, we got the call that said, you're all laid off, go get unemployment. And so I was like, okay. And we were not re-employed again until the following March. So it was like a whole year of doing, did lots of other things. But and in Cedar Falls, they at that point only had 2 full-time staff people. They kept them going the whole time. It was a lot of applying for shuttered venue grants and things like that to keep things going. But both theaters were able to work on projects that they wouldn't have ordinarily been able to do. I know Waterloo Playhouse replaced their stage, and the Cedar Falls Community Theater replaced all their front windows and carpet.
Didn't Waterloo get new seats too?
Just recently they got new seats from Gallagher Bluedorn. Gallagher Bluedorn got the new seats. Waterloo got the gently used seats from Gallagher Bluedorn.
I heard that.
But yeah, that worked out really well. But during COVID, what was kind of nice, taking that break, it allows you other opportunities. And if your mind keeps going, you can't just sit quietly. So that's where Paco Rosick and Paco's an artist in town that his restaurant, he painted the Sistine Chapel on. It's kind of a well-known landmark now. Anyway, he and I collaborated and put together a film production company called Water City Films. And we filmed several short things and one full-length feature, which you can find on Amazon Prime. It's called Without You. It's R-rated, and it's the 2022 version. I guess there's other films with that title, but Without You 2022. And then some of those short films, we had Joel Wagner and Sam Lilja and some of these well-known actors in the area who had come back during COVID, so we were able to use them for some shorter films.
Right. And you're also involved in music on the side, too, at times.
I used to be in a group called Damascus Road, and we did bluegrass music. That's right. And your son-in-law, Dave, was our lead guitar player.
Right.
Yep.
And Joel's dad was the bass.
Joel's dad was the bass, and the Siddig sisters, Kim and Rachel, were our vocal duo.
And they are the granddaughters of a resident here, Merlin Harbaugh.
Oh, right.
Right.
Yeah.
I just thought of his name.
Nice.
Yeah, they're his granddaughters, yes.
Yeah. So, and then Paul Prescott was the one that rounded out that group with us. Yeah.
Is the group still going at all?
No, well, Dave moved away to New York. Everybody kind of got busy doing other things. We had a pretty good run there, though.
Yes,
5 or 6 years we were doing it, and played at lots of churches and lots of festivals and Bacon Fest and Waterloo, and
I remember that.
we had Winterfest in Iowa Falls and Waverly Art Walk and things like that. So it was a lot of good spots.
That's right. You went up to Waverly one time and played in the shelter, or the band shell.
Yeah, they have
at
their
the
art
park.
festival along the river there. And we
I went
played
to
in
that.
it.
Linda
Yeah.
took me to that.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was a neat setting.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of fun to have those experiences. It's fun to make music together. I can see why people, want to do barbershop quartets or sing in choirs or whatever, so that sort of thing. It's
He belongs to the
very
barbershop
rewarding.
quartet,
Oh, nice.
or the barbershop singers.
Singers. Proud image.
Proud Image.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No problem.
I've been to several of their performances also. They are very good. Very, very good.
Yeah, we've got a lot of talent in the Cedar Valley, that's for
Yes,
sure.
yes,
Yeah,
we've
right.
discovered that.
And I have people who are working on movies and commercial projects and things like that. They're always reaching out to me going, I need an actor who can do this, or somebody who's this age. And so I try to help connect them to
There's a
some
guy that
folks.
worked, I can't think of his name right now, that worked for the theater, and he did some filming of Friendship Village.
Oh, yeah.
And Linda was in some of the commercials.
Yeah.
I can't think of his name right now.
There's several folks that do things at KWL that have done their
Yes.
own movies.
Yes.
And Michael Menard comes to mind. And then there's some other filmmakers in town that there's actually quite a few filmmakers now in town doing things. So.
That's good. That's good. So, and you have a family. We haven't discussed that yet.
Yes, 3 kids. One is 21 and she's currently in Guatemala. One is 27 and he is the sales manager at McGrath Kia Hyundai in Cedar Rapids. And my older one is 31, who is a podcaster in Brooklyn, New York.
A daughter.
What's that?
The daughter. The
daughter.
31.
Yeah, she's a
podcast.
daughter, and Heavyweight was the podcast that she ran for Gimlet Media, Spotify. Jonathan Goldstein is her. It was his vehicle, and she was the producer. And my wife Michelle works at Hanson Library.
Right.
Yep. Hanson Elementary in Cedar Falls.
Right. So everybody's employed.
Everybody is employed. Well, Jaffe currently is taking classes, but yes, the rest of them are all gainfully employed. I guess that's a good thing.
Or she will be.
Yeah, yeah. But no, it's been a good place to raise a family for sure here, because we've lived in Chicago for a while and in Little Rock with kids. Chicago is a great city, a wonderful city to visit. It's a lot of fun being single in that city. You could even be married without kids in that city and have a great time. But having kids in a city like Chicago is really tough. I can see why people live in the suburbs, but we live downtown, and it's just really difficult. Your kids can't walk to school together. They can't just go, just by themselves. They can't walk by themselves. They can't even go like to a little store 2 blocks away or something. You just have to keep your eye on them all the time, which makes it hard. And here it's just a little more relaxed. They can walk home from school and all that, as long as you have somebody looking out for them once they get there. So,
Right.
See, I know this is backing up a little bit, but I'm just curious about what that first acting job was for you when you were 6 or 7 or 8.
Yeah, it was the Caucasian Chalk Circle was the name of the play. It's a Bertolt Brecht play, and it was being directed by Nikos Sakharopoulos, which is a very well-known director at the time. And so the premise of that play is there's a woman who's very, very wealthy, and she's had to give her child up at the time that they're becoming occupied by war situations. And so this woman, who's this peasant woman, actually raised this child up to like age 7. And at that point, the mother comes and she wants the child back. And so there's this big trial about who's going to get the child. And the judge draws a Caucasian chalk circle, a white chalk circle on the floor, puts the child in the middle and tells the 2 women, pull him out of the circle. And the one who's able to pull him out gets him. And the one who's raised him and loves him completely just can't bear to hurt the child, and so she can't pull the child out of the Caucasian
Like King
chalk circle.
Solomon.
Right, it's that kind of thing. So anyway, even though the other woman ends up pulling him away, the judge can see the compassion and understanding and awards custody to this. But it's a long, and it's Bertolt Brecht is it's not the easiest dialogue to understand. It's almost Shakespearean in some of its content, and it was long, and I just got to really sit and watch these amazing actors do their thing. I remember like being in the orchestra pit at one point where I'm being held by all the guards who were ready to take me out in the middle of the trial, and I could actually watch this trial going on and see these people, Laurie Kennedy and Stacy Keach, and people who were just amazing actors on stage. It was just a pretty special thing. And they didn't pay me. It was a professional theater. My payment was I got season tickets to that whole summer season, so I got to go see some amazing plays, and they were plays like Moliere's Tartuffe. They were pretty heavy plays, some of them, but I just was enthralled. If you see really, really good theater, it really does have a way of transforming you. Even theater that's so-so is still entertaining and fun, but it gets to be transformative when you see some people who are just at the top level doing it.
And they want to do it.
Yeah, they want to do it, and they're getting paid to do it. That's a whole
Yes.
other thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, have you been to Broadway? Seen some plays on Broadway?
Yeah. Broadway's a great. They're actually having a little trouble right now. They're trying to figure out since COVID how to bring people back in, and so they're reviving lots of shows that they had done previously, like Beetlejuice and Spamalot, and bringing them back. Going, hey, let's try this one. People
Right.
liked this. They're not taking as many chances as they used to do, but it used to be a great venue to see new and innovative and exciting things, and some things like Phantom of the Opera or Miss Saigon, those would be really, really difficult to do, like a community theater level, because the
Yes.
production values are so big. Landing a helicopter on stage, for instance, or K2, where they've got a ice. People are climbing an ice cliff, and so they actually were able to build an ice cliff on stage that they actually climbed. That'd be really hard for our budget to handle that, or figure out how to do it on our stage. So they're able to take some chances and do some things in very big, huge Broadways
Yes.
that are very fun to do. And so it's definitely not always, because there's some that are real clunkers there. They're kind of like, whoa. But if a play
They
really
don't
is
last
successful,
too long.
right? They don't usually hang around too long. They're the ones you'll see
And
in
I
previews.
guess there's a lot of off-Broadway theaters that are very good too.
Yes, and a lot of stuff is really, really good. Never makes it to Broadway because sometimes off Broadway can do it justice without having to have the huge set trappings. Yeah, but there's been a lot of good ones lately.
Right.
Yeah, I know that Waitress is now just becoming available. That's one that I did see on Broadway, and people have been talking about that for a long time, based on that movie Kerry Russell did
Oh.
about 10, 20 years ago. Time flies.
Yes, it
Yeah.
does.
But it takes a long time for certain plays to trickle down so that we can do them.
Right.
A lot of people have been talking about wanting to do Wicked for a long time.
Oh.
And everybody's like, do Wicked. And now it's been so long, people are starting to almost forget about that show. But it's still not available to community theaters.
Takes a lot to get everything done before you actually can get to the theater and with your scripts and with your permissions and with all that stuff
Right.
that goes on behind you to move it forward.
Yeah, and that's why we have this other theater that we also do called Red Herring Theater, and we do 4 productions a year at the Hearst Center in Cedar Falls, and those are ones that are newer, edgier, might not play as well in community theaters, but sometimes aren't even available to do yet on a big scale. But like we're doing one called POTUS, or we just finished, I guess, doing that one called POTUS in late January, that is about the 6 women behind the president who are trying to spin some inappropriate thing that the president said and try to set it all right.
Mm-hmm.
It's very funny, very bawdy. But those are the kind of things we take chances
Right.
with.
And you get a certain audience that likes to come see those.
Yep. And sometimes we do a few of the old classics even, because this April, Gary Kroger, who's a resident here in the Cedar Valley, who used to be on Saturday Night Live TV series in the early 80s, he's directing All My Sons, the Arthur Miller play. So it's a chance to see something like that doesn't get done very often.
Right.
I think you ought to carve out a little time and start on your autobiography.
Yeah.
It'd be,
Maybe.
it would be,
Maybe. At one point I was like, who are all the people that I've met? 'Cause I used to work in a restaurant and I lived in a big city, and so I'd meet a lot of interesting people. And that's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of close brushes, with people that, like they became really famous after I did that show with them or something.
Right.
It's kind of funny. But it's all, it's interesting. And I'm always most happy when a former student or actor that I've worked with goes on to
Big time.
do things, and I'm like, yeah, good for them.
Yes, that's always good.
When you see them on TV later, it's like, oh, that's. There was one time, actually, it was funny. I was driving down the road and I heard a commercial on the radio, And I was like, well, that person seems to have really good diction, and their pacing is good. And I'm like, that's kind of how I would. Then I realized, oh, that's me. It's a commercial I did. And I go, oh, okay, that's good. Because usually you hear your own voice, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's terrible.
Yeah.
So the fact that I was totally removed from it and not actually hearing it right after
It
I'd done
is different when you hear your own voice, but yet you know it's your voice.
Yeah.
Now we get to hear our voices when we do the podcast, and then they play them back, and people get to watch them. Then we get to listen to them
Right.
also.
Right.
And oh, that's my voice.
Yeah, and you can learn too by like, oh, I can change that around next time or do it a little
Yes,
this way or the other.
yes. We wanna,
But when I was in Chicago, I was doing a lot of acting stuff, and I do a lot of print jobs and do whatever you have to do. And there was usually they don't give you copies of it when you're done. You're just glad to get your money and go home. But I have seen like years later, like in some brochure, Pacific Gas and Light. I remember going, "It's me."
mm-hmm.
I'm dressed up like a, repairman for Pacific Gas and Light. So. But most of that stuff doesn't last either. It's all
No.
temporary and gone. And how many TV shows that unless there's the iconic ones, but there's a whole bunch of TV shows that are.
Yes.
And right now, with all these streaming services out there, you can't even watch everything that airs in one night, let
No.
alone
Yeah.
No.
So there's lots of things that people are missing, but just be in the moment, enjoy it, and not worry too much about.
Right. Live for the moment.
There you go. That's the key.
Can you think of anything else we ought to know about you?
What are you going to do when you retire?
Oh,
Yeah, there you go. I don't know. Well, Chuck Stillwell, he retired and he lives here.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of stuff here at the village, right? So
He takes on a lot of projects. I know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I have to, at some point, I have to think about retirement, I guess. As long as my mind just works so much. I go to sleep every night. I've got all these things going through my head. How can I make this set look better? How can I adapt this one section? And so, that's a nice thing to have. Nice to stay, but as long as you don't feel overwhelmed. So it's a fine line between being really busy and having lots to go on and
Yeah.
feeling overwhelmed, because you need time to relax every so often, and that makes it
Wind
hard.
down, take a little vacation. You ever take a vacation?
Yeah, in the summertime, usually. But my schedule is such that I get home pretty late in the evening, and my wife goes to bed pretty early in the evening because she has to get up early to go to. So usually she's asleep by the time I get home, gone by the time I get up. So I need a few of those evenings where I'm not having to work straight through or weekends or weekend day somewhere. Usually I don't get the whole weekend, but we can go do something together. Yeah. We like to go see things at the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis. Minneapolis is really not that far a drive. It's only 3 hours away. And then sometimes get to Chicago or other places where they have a lot of cool professional
I was thinking
theater.
back, you said she doesn't care to be in the theater, but she was in one play one time, I think.
Yeah, she's done a couple plays.
She sat at a desk, and there were like 4 of you, up and down, and they each dwelled on that person to do some talking.
Oh, yeah. That was one we did right coming out of COVID. It was called Love Letters.
Yes.
And we put a lot of couples together.
Yes.
And we did 3 versions of it. And I think Dave and Linda were going to do one of them. And then India and Corey Johnson, Henry and Norma Edsel, and then Michelle and I. And we each did these.
I remember
read
seeing that. She
love
was in
letters.
that.
Yeah, that's right. She did. But she got to read. As long as she gets to read,
Yeah.
she's okay. She doesn't want to have to get up there and...
Memorize.
Yeah, but that was a big push for her. That was kind of a stretch. She doesn't always take on quite that much of a part. But yeah, that was Love Letters coming out. Because coming out of COVID was really hard. People weren't really back into the theater. We had Church Basement Ladies was opening that Friday that we closed the theater. And we had the set all built. We had it all rehearsed. We were ready to go. And then it just sat there, gathering dust. And we tried to keep rehearsing virtually, and that didn't work because when you're trying to sing on Facebook or on, not Facebook, Zoom or whatever,
Yeah.
you have a difficult time making all that work. So, but we eventually did it for about 30 or 40 people per night because they all had to have masks, be separated, aisles separating them. The actors had those face shields on. So that was a kind of a hard time. So coming out of that, how people started feeling comfortable again, whether it's sitting next to somebody you don't know who might be coughing, is always a challenge. But I feel like we've, turned corner, and hopefully going forward, we'll all be taking better care of ourselves. And
I hope so.
getting
And
the
getting our
we need.
shots.
Yeah. And a lot of folks aren't being criticized now for wearing face masks. If that's
No.
something they want to do, that's
If they feel they want to wear one, they can wear one. Nobody
Yeah.
says anything.
Yeah, so that's good. Taking care of each other, that's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Well, it's a good note to stop on.
Right, taking care of each other.
Taking care. Let's do more of that, huh? I got a little pin that I sometimes wear. It says, "Be kind to somebody for no reason at all."
Right.
Yeah. I like that. If you have a choice between being right and being kind, choose kind.
There you are. Words to live by, I'd say.
Yes.
Yes. So we thank you, Greg, for being here again.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me in.
We're going to close with this. May the good Lord bless and keep you until we meet again. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Ta-ta.